Today I'm going to try to draw this facade in Tallinn, Estonia, and man, this took me a long time to settle on. I spent a frankly silly amount of time searching for a reference today, and even though I already had this one in mind, I've actually pre-recorded a little clip of it on my phone so I didn't forget. I still wandered around town seeking I don't know what. Ultimately, I'm happy I circled my way back here because I was getting pretty close to calling it a day, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes. For now, as you can see, I've started today's drawing by marking those 3 dots that represent the vertices of the triangular shape of this roof. It's far from perfect. Clearly it's too steep, but I'll give it a pass. It's not far off enough to make any significant difference. And my prime motive here at the beginning was to just get some lines down as quickly as possible. As opposed to yesterday, I did manage to spend some time beforehand prepping for this in my pocket sketchbook, and it took me a lot longer than I expected it to. Even at a much smaller scale, there are just enough details to demand a lot of attention. So I knew I had to focus and get right into it so I didn't concentrate solely on a single area or component. So you'll notice that I already have the shape of the roof on the paper, and I'm immediately drawing in some of the smaller details. Kind of for the same reason, I want to work my way down while filling a lot of that stuff in as I go, rather than lose focus and bounce around. Again, there are enough details here to throw me off, so I want to keep things flowing in one general direction, at least until I have a solid foundation from which to work. A reference like this usually takes a lot out of me with regard to my attention span, so I'm avoiding a quote-unquote perfect as much as I can. At the end of the day, the small things I tend to get hung up on don't usually matter at all by the end anyway, and I know that. I've learned it through this process, regardless of how often I continue to make the same mistake. But here, once again, I'm feeling really focused, aware of my shortcomings, and I want to make the most of this inexplicable clarity I'm feeling before it fades away. For the majority of this drawing, I wasn't sure at what point things would really start to go sideways, but I'm happy to report that that really didn't happen, which is a major improvement from yesterday. That being said, there were a few things here that threw me off, but quickly, the one that bothered me the most, and something I'm unsure of how to fix, is the shakiness of my lines, which I have talked about in the past. At home, I feel incredibly stable, like my lines are nice and smooth. But today, after only a few minutes, I was feeling pretty like wobbly, which was aggravating because this whole thing pretty much hinges upon lots of straight lines, as you can see. Unfortunately, I think this comes down to having nowhere to put my elbow. There's nowhere for it to rest. The best I can usually do is try to anchor it to my right leg or even my hip sometimes, but that's not always possible. And even when it is, it's super limiting. Today, I tried to put some extra pressure on the pen, which helped slightly, but I'd love to avoid ruining the tips of these, so it's not really a long-term solution. Ultimately, I think I have to just get used to it. That seems like my only option. Anyway, not a huge thing, but something I noticed more today than I have in a while. If you have any tips for me in that regard, let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, take a little peek at the subscribe button. Does it say that you're subscribed? No? That's odd. Seems like you would be. I would be subscribed to a channel that I like. Unless you don't like the channel. But that can't be it. Weird. Maybe try clicking or tapping it, see what it does. Oh, you're subscribed now. Amazing. Glad we fixed that. Anyway, so as I mentioned in the intro, today was not a very nice day for finding something to draw. I've spoken ad nauseum about the ridiculousness of seeking out references and pickiness, So this isn't about that necessarily, but I do want to talk about some of the feelings that bubble up in those moments. It's something I've thought about quite a bit, not only regarding references or drawing or even this channel specifically, but in all endeavors in life, and not just mine, but anyone's. However, I'll still use finding a reference as the springboard. So imagine you're walking through a town and you're looking for something that you want to draw that will also look nice and physically fit into a video, which is something I really haven't mentioned much, if at all. And there's always something that turns you away. It's not that the things you're finding would be bad options per se, but maybe there's something better around the corner, or maybe the light isn't as good as it could be, or maybe there's just not a great place to sit down to draw. These reasons, one by one, begin to stack in your mind, and they make it incredibly easy and comfortable to convince yourself out of not only this reference or that reference, but the whole thing. Nothing seems to be working, and you're wasting a lot of time wandering around. Maybe you just start fresh tomorrow. And that's the moment, I think. That's this dangerous reasoning that can topple more than just that day's progress. It can spill over into the endeavor more broadly, and if you let it, into innumerable other things. So I had this thought while listening to someone talk about like originally wanting to do something, but decided against it for this reason and that reason, another reason over there. And it just hit me how not only is it all too easy to skip a day or slack just this once, but also how easy it is to then rationalize your reasoning, convincing yourself of literally anything and often retroactively. As for drawing, I think anyone could get behind calling it quits for one day over a heap of wasted time. But what about the whole YouTube channel? What about learning to draw in general? I like to imagine how simple it would be to reason my way out of all of it. I imagine telling a friend over the phone about, why it won't work or how it doesn't make any sense. And with enough convincing, most people will accept most reasoning to give it up. Sure, there will come a time when I won't be able to do these anymore. I'm aware of that. But at the end of the day, what makes those eventual real reasons more acceptable than any of those that I could choose today? Uh, Honestly, I don't think anything. Then that got me thinking about big dreams, like life dreams, and how on one hand, it's good to be changing all the time. That's a given. But on the other, how easy it is for people to convince themselves out of anything or utterly fail at even starting something. And for the most part, their rationale not to do those things can be sound often to them. For example, imagine someone wanted to, their whole life, to drive the Pan American Highway from Alaska to Argentina, but then they did a little bit of research and thought that it sounded unsafe or too expensive, or they probably wouldn't be able to get the time off of work. These are all rational reasons to not do something. But the trick is that literally every single thing that you could ever imagine doing comes with reasons to not. And I think people, myself included, make countless decisions every day, and we have our reasons, but we let the nonchalant choice of, say, vanilla or chocolate seep into the big things, the ones that deserve more contemplation, and if we're being honest, grit. So I've been trying to keep this concept in mind for when this or anything else gets a little annoying or difficult. I ask myself, for instance, are you not going to the gym because you think by going you might pull something or drop a weight on your toes? Or are you kind of just tired? And it's okay if you are, that's fine. But just recognize that reasoning, see it for what it is, and be extra cautious when it crops up in other bigger, more, I don't know, spiritually significant aspects of your life. Once again, this is another point for the importance of consistency. But I won't ring that bell yet again. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about all that. Super tangential, I know, but we love those here. Okay, so at this point you might be thinking, wait a second, this isn't looking half bad. When's he gonna muck it all up? And get this, I don't think that I do. I think I truly get all the way to the end without making a mess of things. And that just puts all that reference-seeking nonsense into sharp relief. Is this the most interesting reference in the world? I wouldn't say so. I think it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I don't know. At the time, it felt far away and comparatively lackluster. But what I'm getting from it, the juice I've been able to squeeze out of it, kind of makes me rethink that whole process. Maybe I'm grieving over the references a lot more than I should be, which I know I've talked about before, but whatever. So anyway, yeah, I'm just really liking the way this one was going. And ironically, I didn't feel that way in the moment, which is like the perfect opposite of yesterday's video. Yesterday, I had an awesome time and hated what I made. And today, I was uncomfortable, kind of unconfident, and tired of the whole thing. Yet I love the outcome. And hopefully there's no significance to that because I'd really prefer to enjoy them both. So as I was saying before, you might notice numerous imperfections here, and not just in the quality of my lines or shading or whatever, but specifically with how faithful I was to the reference, or rather, unfaithful. If you happened not to notice, neat, that's great. Ultimately, this is just my interpretation anyway, and I think it shows where my head was at, what stood out to me, and maybe why I excluded some things and included others. However, even though there are plenty of inconsistencies, I'll give myself some credit and say that I did make an effort with some details that I think go a long way to make the drawing that much better. For instance, the design on the upper windows, not a huge deal, certainly not amazing, but it offers a subtle implication of additional overall detail, which I think looks great in this context. But yeah, I think this went really well. It looks nice and detailed, and nothing is blatantly off in a way that would draw in the eye or totally ruin the drawing. I definitely sped through the foliage and completely avoided the bottom section, but I actually practiced both of these beforehand and decided it would be my best bet to just ignore them. Also, I couldn't really sit here for very much longer. So anyway, what do you think? When you saw the reference, was this what you were expecting? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.